Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hi, Steph. Hi, Cheryl. All right, I'm a little in front of the time. Hi, Naren. So we'll give it a few minutes for people to come on. How is everyone? It's evening for me. I know for some of you it's going to be late afternoon, and anybody overseas, it's late in the night. So if you're here from Europe or Australia or any place else, thank you. Hi there. All right, can everybody see most everything? I will move this palette in as I work on it so that you can see how I'm mixing, but pretty much I wanted you to see the Munsell, our chart that we've been building over these past 8 weeks. Wow. So, okay, it's 7 o'clock. So, welcome to those of you who are joining me live here on Substack. I just thought it would be easier and actually more impactful if I showed you how the Munsell palette and the system works while I actually paint something. So I do have the reference up. I already did a drawing. I'm working on cold press paper today, not my normal paper. I usually work on hot press, but we're not going to have to make a very detailed bird. We don't have that time to make something super, super detailed. If you've seen my work, you know I do super, super detailed work. Hey, Leslie, thanks for coming. Hi, Ethel. Um, hi, Theodore. Yeah, so I wanted to just kind of pull everything together. There will be a replay. I will link to all the notes in the replay so everything is together. And then I am actually going to leave this post and all the notes in that same article on the Cricklewood website, free. It's a resource for you to dip into whenever you need it. Get it, dip into. Sorry, but I'm up a little watercolor pun there. Um, so I just want you to have that resource if you want to dive deeper into color. I have a ton of stuff for paid subscribers, and there's always like at least 3 minutes, if not 5 or 10 minutes, little excerpt from things. And we'll talk at the end of this. I have an idea for another Tuesday series. Anyways, so let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I do before I commit paint to paper after I've drawn if I'm making one of my big formal paintings, I have done color studies in my sketchbook to kind of work out my mixes and everything. So I worked out some mixes prior to us starting. And I'll show you how I made them and how I came up with them. So this bird is well, it's the American robin. So there, of course, is black and red. There's a little bit of a bluish purple on his legs. And there is his beak is kind of a almost like a yellowy buff color. And so when I'm looking at the Munsell palette, let's get all this fun stuff here. Here, I'll put this here. So when I'm looking at the Munsell palette, I'm kind of going around these five basics. And I'm thinking to myself, well, there's a red. And so here's my reds, my red realm. This is the actual red color on the palette. And then cooling it off or warming it up. Black sits right in the center, which chromatic black can be toned and altered in so many different ways with all of these colors as well as the neutrals. These neutrals will affect all of these colors as well. There is a bit of a purpley blue on his leg. So I've got my purple, quinacridone purple here. And if you move up the scale, you could see it shifts. It gets more purple versus the violet. We call it violet, going more into the red and getting warmer and warmer, getting more magenta, and then more, moving into the red. So, and that is how we approach mixing. So, for example, our little friend here has a, let me get my reference up so I can see him big. So he has a red breast, and there are different shades where the light is hitting the red breast. Excuse me. It is lighter, and where his form turns away from the light, because the light is coming from this direction. So this is going to be the lightest area of him right here. And this, of course, is the darkest, and underneath is the darkest. So what's happening is you've got all these variations going from light to dark. The most important thing is the quality of the red. It's warm. It's leaning more into the yellow-red realm. But the interesting thing about it, if we were to just mix, I'm going to put this over here because I don't need this right now. If I were to just mix some of our basic red, let me grab a bit of the yellow that doesn't have any green on it, and mix it with some of our yellow, what we get is something that is a little bright. It's just a touch too glowy. Now, things change when you start to add other colors next to it. So let's just kind of, my brush is dirty, so you'll have to excuse that. So let's just put some other colors that would be near that. And we're just kind of looking to see if we had it next to the black, it really starts to have a yellowy undertone. I mean, it's really bright, and that he's not that bright. So what we would want to do is tone that mixture down. So I'm going to make a little bit of that mix right in here. So if we were to warm up our red, that's our warmed up red, but we're thinking it's a little bit too bright, we can hit it with our dull red. Which just takes that chroma down a little bit. Not a lot. But significantly. I mean, it's not uber dramatic, but it definitely has impact and alters. This is more our robin than this is, even if I didn't have that bleed in. So this is how it all works. This is how the system works. You're looking for your general color. In this case, we were looking at red. And then you're looking at what's on your palette. And we have our primaries. So we have a red. But that red it's a neutral red. If anything, it leans cool, but it's really right middle of the road. Um, and we needed something warmer. But something warmer is also something brighter, and we didn't need anything that chromatic. We needed to pull the chroma down, and that's where your earth colors come in. Now, why didn't I choose yellow? Why that this mix had red and yellow in it? Why not choose the yellow as the toner? Because the predominant local hue color was red. Had this been, say, a canary or a pine siskin or a trying to think of a bird with a muted yellow. Red-eyed vireo, which has bright yellows and muted yellows. It's a beautiful bird. Then I would have toned with the yellow. But because our local color or the overall impression of the color is red, I go for the muted red, which is our burnt sienna. Does that make sense? I wanted to tell you, interrupt me. I have the chat window open so I can see it. So definitely interrupt me with questions, you know. Okay, so I'm actually not going to use this brush because it's too wet. There's too much water in it. So the mix that I have here is that. It is actually, I did a red, just pure anthracenoid red. I'll mix a little bit more because we'll probably use some more. And I hit it with some of the burnt sienna. Because in that shadow area near his rump, that is less of a warm red. It's a cooler red, but I still needed to have taken the chroma down. And that's what I did. I could probably even warm it up a little bit more. Whoops. I had to put some burnt sienna on my palette fresh, which I don't really like working with. And I just took a big glop of paint. Okay. Yeah. That's more of what's in that shadow area on his flank and near his belly. Okay. And then what I did is I kind of moved some of that over and I hit it with a little bit of Hansa Yellow Medium, which is our primary yellow. And I can hit that with more Hansa Yellow if I want, but you know, so that's what I did there. All right. The other colors I have on my palette are chromatic black, which separates when it just sits there on the palette. And let's see, let's cancel that. And I mixed up a little bit of a violet blue. I'll re-wet that. So I just took the violet and then I picked up some of the French ultramarine. And I just took down some of that. I just pushed that violet more towards the blue scale. And then to me, his beak kind of just has a thin wash of this. All right. So, how's everybody doing so far with this system? Does that make sense? So we literally just slide around the scale, or in this case, I slide up and down. I tone with these. Okay, so I'm going to put this off to the, well, let's re-wet some of this black. So this is the black I actually mixed in the palette versus I also have a full pan that I mix up myself too, but you can certainly mix in the palette. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I am actually going to put in some of the shadowy areas. So I'm taking the chromatic black and I'm just really watering it down. And I'm only watering down one side. That way on the palette, if I need to dip into this darker, I can just pull some of that over or go from this side and pick up some of the thicker paint rather than always have to go into my pans. All right, so I'm going to put this over here. That's another thing, I always have swatching paper. Now, watercolor will dry lighter than it appears. You can kind of see, you kind of get an idea of how light it will dry if you kind of push your paint so you can see the palette underneath. That's why we always work on a white ceramic palette. You don't want to work on a plastic palette because your colors will bead up on them. I just have always found the plastic uncomfortable. So kind of get an idea. Okay, that's good. So I just kind of squint my eyes down and I look for big dark shapes. And I did kind of pencil in where there's some shadow. So I'm just going to go right over the pencil. If I wasn't doing this kind of a study, I would erase all this pencil, like really take it down. Okay. So I'm actually putting everywhere I see shadow. I'm putting some of this gray mix down. If there's too much on water on your brush, you can always just pull it off. Use the tip of my brush a lot. Kind of looking at these feather groups. I'm really not trying to put in the feather texture so much right now as I am looking at the shadow here. It's like a really big shadow shape that kind of wraps around. And I always work in the direction of the form of the animal, just so that if there's overlap, it just becomes part of the texture, fur texture, feather texture, all of that. Okay, there's a nice shadow right here. And I connect these shadows like they're one big shape. Now black is tricky because your eye wants to just lump it all as one thing, but I'm actually not seeing color. I squint my eyes down until everything looks blurry and all I see are like just these big blocky color shapes. Now I'm using a brush way too big for this area. So this will be fun. I'm going to try to make it so that I don't have to use any gouache on that shine. All right, let's see. Well, I've got some stuff on my brush. I could paint some of the shadows right here. So you've heard me yammer on about this before. We are painting the shadows underneath the feather groups right now. And if you really do concentrate on that, you'd be surprised how efficient you can get the texture in. I just saw something flits. Okay, am I like going on and off? Here I am again. Okay. So I still have stuff on my brush, and I'm just gonna, like I said, go underneath some of this feather texture. There's a nice shadow right here too. Right here. Now, do I always go in and paint all the shadows first? No. But we are pressed for time. The most important shadow of all is the one that lies right underneath here. So making this one a little darker, but it does kind of merge with the with the tail of our friend here. Okay. And I'm looking at the reference to see where that shadow is. That lies underneath him. Because there is also some texture from the log he's standing on. Okay. And there was some texture right in here. Pick up that pool a little bit. All right. All right, I'm good with that. Ooh, did you see how the black moved in there? That's okay. We'll end up mixing them together anyways. That's the other reason why I like working with the Munsell primaries. And towards the end, I'm going to talk about an expanded palette because this is actually my studio palette right here, which has all the Munsell primaries and the earth colors and chromatic black, and then a few extra colors, a lot of extra colors. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. But they all work together so that if stuff like this happens where the black kind of just bled right into the red, it's not a big deal because they all work together. I'm gonna dry off this layer And then we're going to go ahead and start to develop this bird. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay. Let's see. Where do I want to start? Let us start with the bird. So what I want to do is go ahead and add some color around here. So I need to pull up my reference again. Actually, I'm going to go to a smaller brush. Let's do that. Yeah, my number 3 is better. So I'm going to pick up some of this cooler muted red, and it's even a little further deepened and muted because it now has a little bit of the chromatic black that kind of dribbled into this whole area, which is just fine. Now, this is muted not only from the burnt sienna that brought the chroma down, but now it's muted even a little bit more because in chromatic black is a mixture, remember, of phthalo green blue shade, PG7, and anthraquinoid red or pigment red 177. Remember, the pigment numbers are more important than the names of the color. And because of that, that little bit of PG7 mutes this red down even further. So that's a good consistency for now because we're gonna layer up. So here's his little rump. So right under here, just using the tip of my brush to kind of put in, and I'm overlapping that sheer wash of black that we put in. And I'm just paying attention to the shape of this particular color. Now, why I love watercolor so much is because it just layers over each other. So this area that I have a little black underneath, it comes through that way too. Okay, so as I start to travel up the bird here, I can move into an area. Still, this is that muted red, but it doesn't have the black in it, so it's a little bit more vibrant compared to the color that has a little bit of the black in it. I'm just gonna go over that too. Now, a lot of times when I do this, I'm not, like I said, I don't usually put the shadows in first. Usually I put blocks of color and then I layer on top, but we're a little pressed for time. A studio painting takes me weeks, not hours, to complete. I figure you guys have a life. I'm changing the direction of my brush strokes to kind of match the direction of the bird. All right, and I'm going to continue kind of moving into this warmer as it gets warmer because there's more yellow in here. As we start to travel up the bird. Okay, and I am seeing right here that I might actually want to introduce even a tiny bit more yellow into this mix. I like to test it out. Let's test it out some more. Yeah, that'll work. I'm going right over that black shadow. Doing some overlap and changing the direction as his feathers change direction. Okay, so there's a really bright spot here. Actually, there's one right there too. So I put paint where I really didn't want it. So what I'm going to do is carefully lift it up. Yep. All right, let's grab some more of this. I'm going to grab a little bit more of the yellow to mix in and kind of brighten this up a bit. And I'm kind of following, so he's got like a little bib, and the light is going to be brightest right in this area where it hits his chest. And then I just pull a little bit from over here into that yellow mixture because I'm still in an area it's turning away from the sun, but not entirely. And so just by altering that a little bit. All right. I'm also altering how light this is by thinning the paint out a little bit more. I need this to be just a little bit lighter but not necessarily brighter. Okay. Now I want to kind of move this around over here. So because this paint is still wet and I rinsed off my brush and dried it, yep, I can move that around kind of like that. All right. Let's see. So over here on this side, I've got a bit more of that muted red. It's kind of down here. This is a side that's starting to also move away from the light. I just wiped my brush off but did not rinse it to help me move some of this pigment around. And whatever was on my brush, since this area is dry or pretty much dry, I went ahead and put it in there. Okay, I have to pull this up so I can look at it straight on. Okay, we're getting there. These are just the under layers. All right, let's go back to that black. All right, let's go back to our bigger brush too. All right, I think what I'm going to do is first assess what this black looks like. And then I'm looking at the bird. And actually, I think it could probably stand a little bit more. I'm actually going to mix in the palette so you can see how I do this if I mix in the palette. Phthalo green, some of the red. Usually what happens, I always start with phthalo green and then add the red to it. And then what usually happens is it looks a little too reddish. So I hit it with a little bit more green. And that gets me right in the black realm that I want. I am going to actually move some of it over here. And I'm going to hit it with a tiny bit of the violet. Maybe a little bit more. So in essence, I'm toning the black to give it an even kind of a cooler. I don't want it to read as purple, but I do want it to kind of lean more eggplant because I'm seeing that in his feathers, especially where the light hits it. Okay, a little more. Quinacridone purple is a very, very powerful color, so you have to move slow with it. And do a lot of swatches. I think I'm right there. Okay, so let's see. I think what I'm going to do to help this move around a little bit more, and so I don't have to water this mix down, I cleaned my brush. This is always over on this side. You can't see it, but I've got 3 water containers. The one on the far left is always my clean one. So what I'm going to do is actually take some water I'm going to put a big blob of it right in the center of this wing. Now, I'm not going to put the blob everywhere, and that is because I want to be able to control the paint along the edges. And if I just put a big blob, I won't be in control. Okay, so I'm just looking at everything. But by having that big blob there, I can get the paint to move a little bit more. I'm kind of looking what's happening here, following what I already did, getting close to the edge. Now, there was a darker bit right here. A little bit darker under this wing. And while I've got some of this black on my brush, might as well put it there. I'll go ahead and put it on the leg. Okay. And just put it where I see something darker. It actually can go over the whole part of this head. So let's do that little trick again. Whoops. I have to be careful. This is a small head, big brush. The most important thing is right here is a white eye ring. This is a defining feature, so I don't want to accidentally go over it. Here it is again. And I need to be cognizant that where the feathers meet hard material like beaks, that I leave a nice little feathery edge. Now, right here, also, we've got some feathers covering up the nostril. I've got some indications there. Okay. Let's dry this off a bit. Let's see. Any questions? How's everybody doing so far? Let's make sure I'm still in frame. Oh, yay. So any of these colors can be toned, their chroma adjusted, their value adjusted. You adjust the value by adding water. Sometimes you can adjust the value by mixing a darker color into a lighter color. Makes it a little darker, but then there's residual things that happen. It could mute it. It could make it look a little dirty, but not in a bad way, in a good way. You know, things can happen. So yeah, and you can tone any color, including black, and you just move it around the scale to do it. Okay. Let's see, what's the time? Let's do some detail work. And actually, before I do detail work, let me also go ahead and run a wash over this too. So let's see. I'm going to kind of wake all of this up. Add a little bit more red. I'm going to add a little bit of that yellow. I want this to be pretty thin. I'm going to adjust its value. I want this to be a light wash. Whoops. Yeah, that's it. And then I'm going to go over everything. To kind of pull this together. So it's important that I kind of keep the so-called, what we call the bead alive, because I want this to go as like one nice little wash down. Because this is another reason why the Munsell palette works. I can adjust some of these colors by putting a glaze over it like that. Okay, while that's drying, let's do some detail work. I got a drink of water. Oh gosh, let's see. What do I have here? Yeah, I think my 000 brush is completely, I need to pull another one out of the cupboard. I'm painting a big owl across the room. I'm just finishing him up, but he is, he's taking all my little brushes and they're getting these little hook ends on them. So I can't find any of my tiny brushes. All right, I want this to be relatively dark. I don't want this to be pale because we're going to finish. So let me get my reference up again. And I like to zoom in. Oops. Okay. So I'm getting pretty thick mixture. It still moves. And what I'm going to want to do is, let's see, I need to blot my brush. I'm looking at my reference. I want to soften this line a little. This bit of yellow comes right kind of back in here. And then while that's still a little bit on the wet side, I'm going to take some of the chromatic black and pull in a tiny bit of the natural sienna and kind of create a little gray that is more, that's warmer. I might as well put this here as the shadow of one beak under the other. I kind of move this around. Sorry that I have to lift this up so I can see it. I think it's good enough. Okay. Still with me? All right. Now I like to do the eye. I don't always do the eye right at the beginning. I don't always do it at the end. It's kind of going to sound really weird, but I put in the eye of any creature I paint when I feel like it's time for the eye. Because honestly, sometimes you put it in too early and I feel like it's staring at me. And other times I need to have the eye in there as a reference. Okay, so I like to start in the corners. I just use just the black. I didn't tone it or anything. I'm using a pretty thick mixture, trying to follow the eye, the shape, because birds have a particular shape of eye. Hold on, I need to look at it. And then the robin kind of has a little flat. I'm going to let that dry. I usually start with a big highlight and move in. Okay, so there's some other stuff going on. So I need to pick up some more straight black. I don't want to tone it yet. And I want it to be pretty thick. So here's a little trick when you're working out of pans or paint that's dried and you need it to be thick. Don't dip into your water cup. Dip into a wet area of paint that's as close to whatever color you want or is that color, and use that as the water to pick up the pigment, because this already had lots of pigment in it. So I'm less likely to water down the pigment if I do it this way than if I were to keep going into my water and trying to pick up paint out of a dried pan. Just a little non-color tip. Okay, so what's going on right here is, let me Make sure to take out the extra. And so I'm just kind of following kind of the direction of these feathers. I'm staying off of that for a minute. Because those feathers have a little bit of a red, like burgundy-ish, burgundy-esque feel to that black. So I'm toning it with whatever red I've got over there that's leaning more of the cool, staying away from the warmer. And then blotting this a little bit because it's not my smallest brush. And putting in some of this. Sorry, I have to lift it up. Okay. And, oops, there's a little nostril going on there. So I'm going to take some red. I'm going to pick up this mix that I just made and just pop a little bit into it. And it's looking a little too bright. So I'm going to pick up some of the burnt sienna off my palette. And I'm going to introduce it to kind of mute it down. Okay. Because right here is a nostril. Okay. I'm going to pick up some of that black. Okay. And then, for sake of time, I'm going to put some of this in here. So I'm just looking at the shape of this white, and I'm painting all around it. And then there's a really dark feathery shape right here. So I'm going to put that in. So I'm dipping mostly into this black paint. I'm kind of picking out the darkest areas. And then I'm going to pick up some of this more burgundy part. Maybe take some of that in there. I'm going to pop that in right here. I'm trying to get that eye white, that eye ring in a good spot. And the feathers that are under. And so I'm using the darkest, most neutral chromatic black. I'm kind of just looking at some broad shapes. So I'm also thinking of the feather groups. So I'm kind of outlining the auriculars, which are right here. And then I've got the back of the head and the nape. As it comes around. Right here, we've got some feathers. He's got some white chin feathers. So I'm trying to make sure that I have those in the right spot. Okay. Let's hit this with the heat gun. And let's grab some more black paint. I need to reload my palette. So I'm always assessing too. So now I'm working in the black area and I'm trying to think, am I going to need to tone this black? And if I'm going to need the tone the black, I want to have a lot of black on my palette and then do one side, tone it warm and one side cool, or however I think I'm seeing the black. Oop. Okay, if I am looking at his feathers, there is kind of a purpley side. I'm going to mix some of the violet into that black. See? It's interesting. There is a side that is more purple black. So I've got that here. Okay, that's good. And then there is a side that's leaning more blue. So in this case, what's happening is because color is relative. Um, if I had warmed up, if I had created a purple side and then on this side used a little burnt sienna to warm the black up, this would have been red, the purple side as cooler. But now I've introduced some blue, which has cooled it down. And so that purpley side is reading as warmer. So it's all relative. What is cool next to one color will be warm next to another, and vice versa. Okay, so I'm going to use this one for these nape feathers, and there is a shadow right here too. And then I'm going to dip into the cool and kind of, if you can, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but those shadows that I had put in earlier, just to kind of, you're not going to go crazy on the feather texture because this is such a little bird and we don't have, you know, a ton of time. So I'm just going to kind of outline some of the important feathers, or at least put their shadows in. And I'm using that cool blue to do this part. And because I don't really need the information that's over here, I'm keeping the marks real general, brush marks. Just suggesting the primary feathers here. We have a bit. Kind of gets lighter as we get up here. Okay. Gonna go back to this. Grab some more of the black. Kind of put it right in the middle. Need it a little bit more thin. Yeah. So I'm using some of that purple tone because we're in a brighter area of the wing. And now I'm going to go to some of that blue tone and go right on the back and let it kind of mix with the purple tone. Okay. Taking that little tiny brush again and maybe pick up a little bit more black. But at this point, I don't care if it mixes with the purple side or the blue side. There's a little bit of purple in there. That's absolutely okay. because I want to go back over this eye. Excuse me while I look at it straight on. Okay. And I'm really just deepening those corners. And I closed the highlight up just a little bit to give that impression that his eye is round. With whatever's left on my brush, just articulate some of the feathers that are in here. All right. Now, I don't have a lot of time left, but let's just finish up really quick. So I'm using my little brush, and I think I'm gonna take down the chroma of this. So the opposite of violet is yellow, and I certainly could have used the Hansa yellow medium to knock the chroma down, but it also would have, so when you mix yellow and violet, it actually makes a very interesting, very warm, beautiful brown. That's how it neutralizes each other. But by taking our low chroma yellow, I still have something that reads as violet. It just reads as a little bit more muted. So I'm, again, just using the Munsell palette to tone and manipulate my colors. I made his legs too dark, but that's okay. These aren't his legs, they're his feet. Sorry, I know better. I still call them that on occasion. I'm just going to do the indication of toes. We're not going to stress ourselves out about this. Oops, must not forget that back toe. Okay. All right. So here we have our purpley black and our bluish black, and there's a little bit of our neutral black. But I'm mixing it all together, and I'm going to pick up a good amount of burnt sienna to make a brown. Now, I could use burnt sienna and ultramarine blue to make a grayish brown, and I think we're actually going to do that with the birch bark here. And let's see, I want this side to lean more red and this side to lean more cool, or warm and cool. Okay, so underneath him, actually, let's put a little bit more water in here because I really don't want it to be thick. We're going to go real loose. And let's I'm just going over what I did. We've got the shadow here. I'm going to pick up some of the warmer and put it right up alongside. And I might even want it to be a little warmer as we move into the sunlight. Oops, I have too much. There we go. And I am kind of looking what's happening down here. I'm going to make it even warmer as we move into the sunlight. And a little lighter as we get out this way. Oops, I went right over his foot. We're not going to worry about that. All right, and I want it to be a lot lighter, and maybe we'll introduce some of our neutral yellow right here. Now, this is okay because when this dries, I can always go back over these toes and put them back in with darker paint. There's a misconception that you can't layer with watercolor, but that's not true. You can. Yeah. Okay. All right, let's mix up the burnt sienna with the blue. So I have a good amount of burnt sienna in here already. And yes, I do have black in there, but honestly, it's all transparent colors. And I'm going to have the same effect. So this is going to mix up more of a dusty, more of a grayish blue, grayish brown, I should say. That's just how burnt sienna rolls. See? Oops. I hit it with some water. You see how that's more of a gray color? And you can vary it. You can make it more of a cool. I'm just going to do it real light. Whoops. And if anything's wet up here and they bleed together, it's not a big deal. And I'm just adding more water while it's still kind of wet to thin it out and make it move. All right. And how are we all doing so far? Still good? All right. And the last piece. So I have this green that I made by mixing phthalo green blue shade. I pulled up a little bit of the black and I added a little bit of the muted yellow because I just like that green. It's a nice, you see how that's a really nice kind of a natural green. But it's still kind of bright. And I don't want it to outshine the bird. So I'm actually going to pick up some of that. Grab some of this to mute it down even more and maybe pick up some of that yellow. because I want it to be warm, but I want it to be muted. So I use the dull red, the low chroma red, burnt sienna, to kind of take this chroma down. See how I did that? But when it does, it takes it down because it neutralizes it, because we're mixing a red with a green. But it's not warm. It didn't feel warm. So then by introducing the muted yellow, I still have something that is muted, but now it's leaning warm instead of more cool. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to need a lot of water because I actually don't have a lot of paint here. So I'm just going to thin it out. All right, I need to switch him upside down. We might want to make it just a little warmer. Okay. And I'll start here because I'm right-handed. So I'm just going to put a nice big blob. Take this. And now just start to move it around. So again, I just create a little bit of wet on wet, but because I still need control around the perimeter of the bird, I have to leave that area, I have to work wet on dry. So I'm able to do that just by making it wet in the center and then moving the wet paint into the dry area. Again, it's all about the control. Now I gotta be careful right here because there's a little bit of white feather that shows. And because now I'm painting around it, I can paint the background around the white feathers, and then you see them a little bit more. Okay, put some more here too. Oops. Ooh, things are mixing up. Same thing here. There's just like a little halo of white right on his butt. Okay. Let's do some fun stuff in here. Switch them around. I'm just kind of thinking Looking at the shapes that are around him. Because I've got some wet on wet, this is still sopping wet, and so I can make some soft. I'm not really good at the abstract stuff, so forgive me. Oops. All right. Let's hit it with the heat gun and see what we're up against. Does anybody have any questions so far? Have you been following the Tuesday color theory posts that I've been putting on Notes? And do you find those helpful? Have you been incorporating those into your practice? Oh, thanks, Leslie. Leslie said that she had fun watching and listening, and that she's inspired to finish the drawing she was working on while I was working. I love that. I love the idea that we're all working together. I just feel like I have this dream of someday having this big, like, atelier with this huge table in the center, or it's hard to explain, but a table you could either stand or sit at, and that we're all around it with our paints and our graphite and our sketchbooks all spread out while we're working on our paintings. Let's see. Lisa said oh, you liked the post. Okay, Lisa liked the post. Good. I really wanted to demystify color and really get you started mixing and working with a limited palette. When I started watercolor painting, I actually started with three colors because, we're taught there are three primaries. And I basically worked with a red, a yellow, and a green, red, a yellow, and a blue. Um, and it was helpful to be able to learn to mix as much as I could, but just red, yellow, blue, it is very limiting. That's why once I was shown and then taught to use the Munsell system of primaries, I was just everything exploded, and all of a sudden my work changed. I've always enjoyed mixing colors, but man, that then I was just like, this is awesome. There isn't a color out there that I can't mix up with these five, these two uh, earth colors, and my chromatic black. I pretty much can create anything I want. Um, but I wanted to talk to you really quick about expanding said palette. So I moved from a three color system to the Munsell system, introduced earth colors and chromatic black, which is what I teach. And then when I started painting professionally, I expanded my palette to include some convenience colors. So basically, this is the Munsell palette. I've got all my neutrals here. Um, my neutral yellow, I have my burnt sienna, I have my chromatic black, and then I built out from that. I have a slightly brighter, more orange version of burnt sienna called quinacridone burnt orange. But I still consider that a neutral. It's still a toning color. And I've introduced two minerals into my palette now, mostly because I'm starting a new series of paintings on shorebirds, and it's for convenience. But I built out my greens, so I still have my phthalo green, and it's pretty much in every mix I do, but I do have a few others that are just helpful for me because I paint a lot of nature and birds. I expanded my blues, I expanded my reds, and my reds start over here. So I built those out, and then I expanded a little bit my yellows. Now on my palette, and this is how my studio palette, which is across the room right now next to another painting, is laid out. I have another tin box with full pans, and this is exactly how it's laid out because I can scoot along this ribbon, adjusting colors as I work. I do keep two of the exact same yellows at opposite ends of the string, and that's so that this doesn't happen. As you can see, I tried to keep the green when I mixed the green or mixed a blue in. I tried to keep it on one side of this yellow and the red on the other side, because what'll happen is if I dip in here blindly and happen to catch some of this green when really I'm trying to pick up yellow to put into a red mixture, if I had any hopes of keeping that mixture bright, it just ended with that little tiny bit of green that's hiding in my bristles now. So to solve that problem, I actually have two yellows at opposite ends so that I mix my blues and my greens into this one, and my violets and my reds into this one. And then I never have that problem where there's kind of like this hidden muted or muddiness to stuff. But I'm thinking about doing another Tuesday series because now we've come to the end of our basic color theory series. We are about to start next month in July Cricklewood Camp, so I won't be doing the Tuesday series in July and August because we will be doing camp instead. But then in September, I'd like to pick it up if the Tuesday series are helpful. And I have a couple ideas. Either I can continue with color and we talk about building an expanded palette, um, or we can move on to something different. And I have a bunch of ideas, but I'd love to know what would be helpful for you. What would be a good series? Now you've seen the color series. It only is the tip of the iceberg because I have less than 5 minutes to create a video. So, and I wanted to tell you all the things, but I had to be super focused. So it would be something again that would be very general, but the topic would be specific. So I'd love to hear your ideas. So if you, for the next month, think about it and then DM me or tag me on notes and say what you would be interested in or anything like that. Just so that I can add to my idea list and start planning. And then in September, we pick up the Tuesday series again. But yeah, so I hope that you practice with the Munsell primaries and the earth colors in black. Pull some photos, or when you are out nature journaling or just when you're out taking a walk, take photos and bring them back and start to play with mixing and matching colors. This is just a simple watercolor sketch. I didn't get very detailed, but just enough to kind of see how the colors play with each other. So yeah, uh, I really I really enjoyed doing this. I really enjoyed doing the demo for you, and I hope that that kind of brought everything together. So let me know if you need any help or have any questions, more ideas for the series. Oh, thank you, Ethel. Ethel says it's been very helpful. And yeah, if you are a Cricklewood Nature Journal subscriber, yay, and thank you. There's lots of stuff on the site. We have Cricklewood Camp coming up, which is for everybody, whether you're a subscriber or not. I feel the need to torture everybody with Cricklewood Camp, so that's for the public. But you know, you get a newsletter if you subscribe and kind of stay up to date on the news. I try to recap notes and talk about you know, we talk about nature journaling and share techniques and stuff. So yeah, I'd love it if you would become a subscriber. You also get notification when Wonderfilled Wednesday pops up. But that's the other thing. If you aren't aware of that, every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. I am live streaming on Substack. And we are working in our nature journals, or sometimes we're painting birds. I'm mostly a bird artist. I paint mostly birds. I'm a wildlife artist, but I paint mostly birds, and so birds tend to be the most that we do. Um, so, but that it's a good time. It's just a little relaxing hour, sometimes 2 hours, depending on what we're doing. Right now, we're in a drawing series, so you should check that out. Come, just bring paper and pencil tomorrow. We're drawing bird parts. so, so yeah. Well, thank you all for showing up. Like I said, reach out to me if you need any help, if you have any questions. I'd love to see what you're doing. So if you post that on Notes, tag me. Feel free to send me a DM with pictures of what you're doing. I love to see what people are doing. And if you are drawing and painting nature, when you share that with us, with everybody in the community, you know, I live up and down East Maine. If you're from Oregon, you're going to see slightly different things, or maybe sometimes entirely different things. And this way we get to share the nature in your area, and I share the nature in my area, and we all get to learn and enjoy and relax. Okay. Yeah, so thank you so much, and hopefully I'll see some of you tomorrow. I hope I see some of you as Cricklewood Nature Journal subscribers. I've got a few tiers, so feel free to explore, see what strikes your fancy, what helps you in your practice. Okay. Have a wonderful rest of your evening or afternoon, or if you are in the middle of the day because you are in the Southern Hemisphere. Just have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your Tuesday/Wednesday, and I'll see you soon. All right. Bye, Leslie. Bye, everyone. Take care.